for something completely different, as Monty Python used to say. So what I want to do today is a really small thing. It's a sort of combination of two different research activities that I have, which I thought were quite separate, and I now tend to think that maybe there's a connection between the two, and I thought maybe other people would like to comment on whether there is really a connection or whether I'm just fantasizing there about that connection. So part one is I'll give some really elementary introductions, because this is not a philosophy seminar, so I explain a little bit what ethics is in my view, which is a little different from the standard view, and then the main body of the talk is a reproduction of a paper that I wrote recently on the singularity, and on the importance of goals in that discussion, and then I'm coming back at the end of that discussion to what it is to have goals and why that might be relevant for the understanding of cognition and ethics, and how cognition and ethics are actually much more connected than people usually think they are. So the biographical background to this is that I have been working a little bit on philosophy of AI and ethics of AI for quite some time, about 15 years or so. And I've recently written this little survey article on it, well, recently, last year. And at the time, the only survey on AI ethics there was. And one of the things I singled out there as interesting questions was the singularity at the end and the conceptual repercussions of all these discussions. So I think there is actually an interesting development in philosophy, which is ongoing, sort of similar to what I think Nordhoff is doing. I mean, in neurophilosophy, I think we're now doing some kind of machine philosophy. So we're going back to the philosophy from what we've understood about machines. I'll explain that in a minute. So very basic distinction, which I think is important for our discussion here, is the distinction between descriptive and normative. So we can describe how the world is, or we can say how the world should be. This is sometimes misunderstood. So, for example, the things like data is likely to change the world, or people have norms and values. These are descriptive remarks, and nothing follows from that. But if you say something is more important than something else, or you should have done something like that, then these are normative remarks. And ethics is about the normative remarks. Ethics traditionally was just, the word was just describing what people do, the ethos, the customs, what one does, like in the slogan, you know, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, or something like that. The same applies to morals. So the way I see ethics, it is the systematic reflection on the normative. So the basic question of ethics in good Kantian tradition is, what should I do? But I'm taking that in a slightly broader sense than Kant. So Kant thought that certain things are part of the ethics, which are not all the things which have this form, what should I do, are parts of ethics. So, for example, the question in the chess game there on the right, what's the best move to win, is not part of ethics. It says ethics involves some kind of immediate duty and a categorical imperative, as he calls that, as opposed to a hypothetical one, which is I should do something if I'm trying to achieve something else, for example, winning in the chess game. So, for my discussion, I will just assume ethics discusses everything that's normative. Now comes the second part, little rehash of some discussions on the singularity. I think the basic argument for existential risk from AI goes something like this. There are two assumptions, namely A, super intelligent AI is a realistic prospect and it would be out of human control. I call that the singularity claim, because it says that there is this point in time where this occurs, and it's called the singularity. And B, any level of intelligence can go with any goals. This is known as the orthogonality thesis. This is explicitly defended by several people. And it follows from that a super intelligent AI poses an existential risk for humanity. It's very easy to turn that into a formally valid argument if you want to do that. You need B because it could be otherwise that a super intelligent AI might just be super ethical and do whatever is super ethical, which may, of course, include killing all the humans, but we hope that that's not the case. Now, in this discussion here, we think that we've discovered that there's a trick in this argumentation, and the trick is that the two premises are using the word intelligence in a different way. So the argument from superintelligence to existential risk, that is the singularity claim, uses some kind of notion of general intelligence, which is usually in this discussion, unfortunately, completely undefined. It sort of means the kind of thing that humans have, but more of that. General cognitive abilities with some kind of intention. In the orthogonality thesis, on the other hand, people have discussed what they mean by intelligence, and there they talk about instrumental intelligence. So they're talking about the kinds of things that people discuss in decision theory. That means that you have to have some kind of goal or utility function specifically right there, and then you see what's the best way to achieve that. Okay, and it seems to us that these are two quite different beasts. So in other words, instrumental intelligence and general intelligence are not the same thing. Here's the explanation of that. So here is the instrumental intelligence. Instrumental intelligence, that's something that Nick Bostrom, who's one of the defenders, of course, of this kind of thesis, has explained several times, is capacity for instrumental reasoning, means-end reasoning, and so on. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that you could call problem solving. You have a problem, you find a way to solve it. General intelligence involves all of those things. You can do the problem solving. It also involves problem defining. So the characteristic difference, it seems to us, between normal instrumental intelligence and general intelligence is that general intelligence involves something that you might call metacognition. So you don't just pursue some goals, you also reflect on the goals, whether these goals are relevant. So a chess computer, for example, will just try to win the chess game. A human will not necessarily do that. So if you play against, I don't know, your 7-year-old niece, then you might think, well, it might not be a good idea to actually crush her in the game, if provided that she's not some kind of chess genius. But you should try to make sure that you're having a good time and that she enjoys the game and that maybe she wants to continue learning it. So maybe it's a good idea to give her a good chance to capture some of your pieces or something like that. So that is, you're widening the frame of your reflection from just winning the chess game to saying what matters here and what goals are actually important. Of course, you could widen them further, right? And say, we should not even be playing chess now. We should take care of the invaders to Ukraine or something else, completely different thing. So general intelligence, in other words, is a broader notion than instrumental intelligence. So we conclude from that that we can't have it both ways, that the singularity claim and the orthogonality thesis, these two premises of the argument, might both be true, but only if we take them to be about two different forms of intelligence, because orthogonality for general intelligence is extremely implausible, and the singularity claim for instrumental intelligence is also implausible. So we say that we don't really see a way to interpret intelligence in such a way that we would get both out of those.
Can you just go with the orthogonality? Why is that going to run counter to singularity claims?
Okay, so maybe I'll just go back and see where we have the statements. Okay, so the orthogonality thesis is B here. Okay, so B means I can have any goal whatsoever, and it seems to us that that is not right if you're taking general intelligence, because general intelligence would allow us to reflect on goals. So it's not the case that any goal is as good as any other, but we can have arguments on which goals are better than other goals. So whether, for example, winning by better performance is better than winning by cheating. And that, it seems to me, indicates that orthogonality is not true for general intelligence. So,
yeah.
Good. Maybe I think I'll skip this bit because that's probably just confusing people. So the last bit here, section 5, is to try and wrap this together into some kind of understanding of normative metacognition. So it seems to me that intelligence therefore involves a number of different skills. One of them is instrumental intelligence, that is the rational choice to maximize expected utility, subject to utility. Then there is the wider notion of intelligence that would involve embodied systems. It would involve embedded and extended systems. So we're not just using our bodies, but we're also using other technical means that are part of the explanation why humans are so successful as a species. So the artifacts that we create and the culture that we've created is a significant part of that. So it seems to us, in other words, that the difference between general intelligence and instrumental intelligence, that general intelligence involves metacognition, is a little quote from Dag Hofstadter from that. He says, "It's an inherent property of intelligence that it can jump out of the task which it is performing and survey what it has done. It's always looking for and often finding patterns." So this is what we call widening the frame. And if we can do that, then we can actually have goals which are really our own goals, as opposed to just things which have been sort of defined for us. So it seems to us, in other words, that the ability to reflect on goals is an elementary part of general cognition. In other words, the ability to do ethics is an elementary part of cognition. So that's the opposite of the orthogonality thesis, right? The orthogonality thesis says that we have intelligence, this is one thing, and we have ethics, and it's a completely different thing. And here the suggestion is that the ability to reflect on goals, to reflect in a normative way, is part of standard cognition and needs to be understood as that. And that is the reason why it seems to me that we now should understand ethics in a slightly different way, and we should also learn something for ethics from the reflection on AI. So that's why I'm suggesting that there is some kind of a digital philosophy here, so some kind of philosophy that generates insights from the reflection on AI. So this is a sort of programmatic beginning of that kind of activity. That was my little intervention.
Right. So Vincent, the singularities themselves, I think you may need to explain a little bit more. I mean, the sort of Leary scenarios that people like Kurzweil and Bostrom and so on. This idea that suddenly an AI imbued with some adaptive capacity to find better and better solutions can suddenly, and the story, let's take that the AI that the paperclip AI, it just smelts down all the metals, and then when it senses, because its goal is to produce paperclips, it single-mindedly pursues that. It uses all of its adaptive capabilities to achieve that. So it even senses that you're going to be hostile to it and pull its plug, and then it'll sort of turn on you as well. That's the sort of idea. So that's a sort of singularity, one of the singularities. And the other one, of course, is they're going to evolve, become more clever than us. In many respects, yes, but then we're used to that. I mean, you need. No,
I think this singularity. So that's a bit which obviously I didn't explain in the slides now. So the idea of the singularity is always that we are reaching a point at which the machines are more intelligent than humans, or at least as intelligent as humans. And at that point, the further development of AI will be up to the machines. So the machines are then also as good as humans on developing AI. Therefore, the machines will develop the next generation AI and they will be smarter, and so on. And this is often understood to be a possibility for an explosion, and a very quick growth in a short period of time, because the assumption is that some of that progress can then be achieved in a mechanized way, which would be way faster than what we're doing now. And Nick Bostrom's idea is that this is dangerous. Ray Kurzweil's idea is that this will be beautiful. So the question is, which one is right about this? And of course, is the whole concept a sensible concept? So Nick says this would be very dangerous because these things would be out of our control. I think that's clear. That would be out of our control if there would be super intelligent beings in the world that would not be controlled by less intelligent beings. Our own experience shows that that's exactly what we are doing on Earth right now with the other animals. So then he says, okay, therefore, these beings will end up doing whatever they think is the right thing to do. And that could be whatever. So it could be making paper clips if it so happens that this was the kind of thing that was started, that was the utility function that was defined for it. So in other words, he assumes that even for a super intelligent being, any goal is as good as any other goal. That yes, the super intelligent being would not sit down and think, why the hell should I make paper clips? What's the point in doing that? Right?
Exactly.
So he says that you could be super intelligent and yet unable to reflect on goals. Okay, so this is already dubious because it seems hard to see how you could really understand everything about the world, including, for example, that you have certain intentions which might run against my wanting to make lots of paper clips, and so I'd better get rid of you as an obstacle, and so on. And so that would involve quite a lot of understanding of humanity, intentions, etc., etc. But more importantly, the idea is that the paperclip maximizer would actually be able to step out of the frame of the paperclip making and say, in order to make paperclips, apparently there's another goal which is important. For example, I need to maximize access to energy, and these humans are in my way, so I'll get rid of them. So the idea is that you can do all of that, but you can't at the same time reflect on goals. So that, it seems to me, is a problematic notion. Okay. So the reason why.
So what is your counter to it? I mean, yeah, go on.
Okay, the counter to it is really quite simple. My suggestion is that you're making two assumptions in order to get that argument flying, and in the one assumption you're using an instrumental notion of intelligence. That's the orthogonality thesis. And in the other assumption, namely that super intelligent machines would take over, you're using a general notion of intelligence, and you can't have it both ways.
So then can we go to bed without having nightmares about this? Basically, you're saying it's never going to happen. These scenarios are...
Not really, I'm afraid. So there's two reasons for not going to bed too quietly yet. One is, it could be that a purely stupid instrumental goal pursuing AI is bad enough. It will not be as bad as Bostrom imagines it. It will not take over the world, etc. But it might do a lot of very stupid and detrimental things, and that is actually happening to some extent already. And of course, the other point is there is a significant probability that I'm wrong. And of course, if I'm wrong, then existential risk from AI really is a problem. And And so there is a probability that that really is a problem. So that would not be the case. That would only be the case if I were right and we knew that I was right, but we're not in that position, definitely.
I don't know, Willem, do you want to add? I mean, this thing about, you must have heard of Captain Ahab and Moby Dick, right? He said all my methods are fine, they're rational, super rational kind of thing, but my objectives are completely crazy, bonkers, right? Chasing the white whale and so on. So economists have been up against this for a long time. I mean, the idea that you're a function and that's all you, instrumental rationality. But then we have this idea of, when you talk about Kenneth Arrow's non-dictatorship, in other words, if each one of us are to be autonomous and, goal-oriented, then the system as a whole has to be open-ended, right? The end-neutral rules, the state that Kant talks about, that means you can't have both things that are purposive. You can't have individuals that are purposive and also the system itself at the state level or some sort of collective level also having objectives, except that I can't do anything that would then violate your equal right to do the same, So, but AI doesn't live in that world. It's not constrained by the fact that, what I call the universality principle. In other words, I can only do things that you can also do. So then that becomes the counter there, that I can't pursue my objective without thinking about you as well, your equal right to do the same. So why wouldn't that hold?
The difficulty is that you seem to assume that it is possible to have a super intelligent AI which would have aims, but would be unable to reflect on those. And that's what I'm saying. It is not plausible.
Right. Anybody else? Adam, remember we discussed about self-improving AI. Why is that not, the only problem is we can't think outside. You could be self-improving, but the purpose remains the same, the objective remains the same. At what point can you say maybe the objective is the wrong thing? Are you there?
I'm here. I've seen different counters to the orthogonality thesis, and I tend to agree with what was just presented. So in a lot of the scenarios, like Bostrom will talk about something like a treacherous turn where there's very high degrees of social intelligence, such that the system is capable of deceiving people. Well, this seems like you've now unfolded in a kind of like, now you have dependencies on things like the type of like reflexive capabilities and meta-awareness if you're actually capable of fooling others in those ways. Further, I'd say like, I think there tends to be a kind of potential confusion about human intelligence, where like we might try to reduce it to the algorithm or to like maybe even the architecture as a whole. But part of what that gets us is it gets us like ability to basically do natural language and couple and basically inherit the cultural endowment. And so, so now you have like a meta brain of all of us interacting with the world, figuring things out over like long periods of time. And that's what makes us so smart. Like you could take like von Neumann and like, if he was feral, he'd just be like maybe a clever primate. He might not even be a clever primate. He might be like a fairly dumb primate if you did not enculturate him. And so now you have a whole nother set of path dependencies that are infusing value with intelligence. And so if something like natural language is part of the bootstrap, which seems very likely that you would need this for something to pull off something like a singularity, well, now, we didn't like write out language in like the predicate calculus. It's a good old fashioned natural language. Like even if you take like the most like technical dry things like from like an AI company, it's still just like, laden with like metaphor and implicature and all these like pragmatics that like you need common ground. You need like some idea of like right now, like I'm not enunciating very well. I'm kind of fumbling, but you kind of get what I'm saying because you have some sense for what I mean, because you're all kind of like me. And so you have common ground and common sense, and you're able to disambiguate this like word salad I'm throwing at you a little bit, hopefully. And
right.
so like,
so Adam and Vincent, so are we saying that because AI doesn't have our framework for empathy, in other words, I make you out because I'm making self-referential use of my own embodied self, right? That's how I make you out. I reuse the same codes. We believe in the mirror neuron system and so on. Whereas AI doesn't have that capability. So another AI, or how does it have a sense of self and the other, or it has no sense of empathy? Does it, can we breed that, can we breed that into AI? Because without that, how is it to know have any sense of ethics? Because the other is not a projection of self. So, what do you care? And what does AI care about others?
I thought Adam was making, so I'm continuing along the lines of what you said. Well, what is it that I understood from what you called the word salad, which wasn't a salad, but anyway, so I thought your point was that the cultural endowment, so to speak, that explains our intelligence, which I totally agree with, is or at least is a huge part of the explanation for the intelligence of the human species, would be not readily available to the AI for use, so to speak, because it wouldn't really understand what is going on there. So it's sort of like a Wittgensteinian point that if a lion could speak, I wouldn't be able to understand it.
Yeah,
is that the idea?
That would paraphrase it perfectly. And so then like the question would be like, even if we're doing some, okay, so if we're talking about a system capable of advanced deception of human-like agents, I find it implausible that it would be capable of that without being able to, I don't know, be less lion-like and more human-like. But like, I find that implausible. But even like something like engineering, like knowledge synthesis from just like, so we want something to like read the internet. Well, it has to understand now. What does it mean to understand? It means to be able to unpack like some kind of like causal world model based on what it's reading, that it can then like bring together all these facts and like test out the different hypotheses. Probably it's not just like the next version of GPT, whatever. So like that seems to and I'd argue like even like the lion, like a souped up lion still wouldn't be able to do even basic engineering, because even that is an intensely social activity where we're like inheriting know-how via like a subset of the cultural endowment, but we're still just, neck deep and needing some kinds of empathy. I mean, there's still like a bullet to be bitten, and like psychopaths exist. So it's not like maybe it's not pure orthogonality, but it's not like pure collinearity either. Like, or it's like there's still like some separability that's like, don't piss them off, raise them well, or however you grow the system. But I would claim like just as a matter of practicality, likely to make AIs do the things we need to do, we're going to need to give them some basic abilities to somehow access basically empathy to some degree, so that they can understand others enough to get it to actually work with natural language.
Right. I think this, let's say there is a way in which I can interpret what you've said as supporting what I've tried to say. So I will try to use it that way. So my suggestion was that we would need some kind of broader notion of cognition, which includes normative thoughts, right? And so what you're saying is that empathy with other beings is crucial. And it seems to me that these two things aren't very far apart, because empathy presumably means that you then say, oh, I can now feel that hitting the thumb is worse than not hitting the thumb of that other being there, because it will hurt just like my thumb would hurt if I would hit it with a hammer. So it includes that normative thought. Why is it inherently bad if somebody feels pain? It might be overruled by something else, right? But it is inherently something negative, and so that generates the normativity and the real goals, it seems to me. So you can reflect on that and say, well, yes, but in this case, because I know that you're really sick, I need to give you this injection, and therefore you'll have some pain for getting the injection, but it's really good for you, so it's okay in the longer run. I would make normative considerations about this, but they're based on this empathy thought. So in a sense, my point is similar to that I would say we need, in order to have an understanding of some kind of super intelligence that really works and is smart enough to generate something like world dominance, it would have to have access to something like that. That's the idea.
So the chances of having a sort of super intelligence, but that is up to us right now, because we haven't yet got to the stage where any of the AIs anywhere near to what Nick Bostrom or Kurzweil talks about. Surely it is for us to then somehow start that software, because it's meant to be that software then sort of bootstraps itself into super intelligence. So somehow we build the software right now for the AI that would breed, that would have these capabilities, right? Isn't it up to us to build the sort of AI that would have empathy?
Yeah.
But that's the whole point.
This might be up to us. It might be up to us, but it might be that it happens anyway. So when I was still at FHI, Nick and I wrote a paper on when you would expect superintelligence to occur. And so we asked lots of people what they thought when the probability would go over 50%, and the median response was 2040 at that time, which was like, I think 7 years ago or 6 years ago, something like this. And I think the assumption there is that you might have developments of exponential growth which could come at you pretty quickly, and even those of us who weren't very familiar with exponential growth 2 years ago, I think we've now all become quite familiar with these kind of developments in the pandemic. So I think the expectation is not that we would just sort of putter away with programming and then boom, we get that thing, but that we would produce systems that have the ability to do something by themselves more and more efficiently, and then they would go out and learn more and more things. And so Nick thinks that machine learning is, so to speak, on the right path for producing that, well, which is then going to be a problem.
I mean, recently I was reading something that Daniel Dennett said to David Chalmers about, you're wasting your time thinking about superintelligence. It's never going to happen, right? I don't know that if.
But that's an interesting sort of, if you want this, an interesting case. So these two superheroes in contemporary philosophy disagree on it. Right?
Yes.
So Chalmers thinks it's a real problem that we should.
If there's a real put down, you should see what David Tennant said, that Chalmers was after him to comment on a paper where, Chalmers was trying to talk about superintelligence. I read that just to sort of get up to speed for your talk. I'm surprised. I mean, that you're wasting your time trying to talk about superintelligence. It's never going to happen, right?
Yeah, but both of these people have actually written about about AI and its similarity to human cognition and so on. And so it's interesting. It seems to me that both of these people who've influenced contemporary philosophy quite significantly have actually worked on AI.